Somebody is trying to sell you an AI automation retainer. $5,000 a month. So, let's open it up. Here is what is actually inside that price on my model, best case to worst. Out of every $5,000, the actual artificial intelligence costs about a tenth. The human work costs more than 3/4.
You're not buying artificial intelligence. You're buying a person who can be blamed with an AI-shaped label on the outside.
That gap between what the technology is worth and what it sells for is the subject of this video. And it runs all the way up. In the quarter that ended April 26th, one company reported $75.2 billion from its data center platform at a 74.9% gross margin. That July, in one spending panel, the median American company put $11.95 per employee into AI. The top 1% of that same panel, ranked by spend per employee, put in $7,400. Both numbers describe the same technology. Only one of them describes a business. I'm staying inside that gap for the rest of this video. And I'll tell you up front what would have to happen for this argument to collapse. Focus on this. Nobody makes money with artificial intelligence. They make money with the thing artificial intelligence makes scarce. That's a claim about relative prices, what gets cheap and what doesn't. When a capability becomes almost free, the money doesn't evaporate. It moves to whatever stayed scarce. Same money, different pocket. 5 simple concepts. Distribution. Is the channel yours, or do you rent it? Ask anyone who built a business on somebody else's search results. Trust and verification. Can anyone see for the output? That's why an audit costs more than the spreadsheet. Proprietary data and rights. Do you own an input that can't be regenerated? A back catalog. A private dataset. Energy and physical throughput. Do you own capacity in the real world? A substation. A factory slot. And licensure. Is there a legal barrier to entry? You cannot prompt your way into signing an audit. Every honest AI income in 2026 is a rent on one of those 5. Every scam is a promise that you can skip them. And this isn't my idea. It's the weak appropriability case David Teece describes in his 1986 paper in Research Policy.
When imitation is easy, markets don't work well, and the profits from innovation may accrue to the owners of certain complementary assets, rather than to the developers of the intellectual property.
Watch one word, may. Teece says the profits may end up there, not that they always do. The framework is conditional, and it sets out 2 cases. Where a real patent protects you, you keep your profits owning no complement at all. I'm working from the other one when imitation is easy, which describes almost everything sold to you as an AI business. Now, 2 ways to refute me. First, if a durable winner owns none of the 5, my model failed. The case people will throw at me is mid-journey, distribution it didn't control, no proprietary data at launch, no energy, no license. I'm not putting a revenue figure on that because there isn't an audited one. And if my answer is taste, I've invented a 6th complement to protect the model. Second test. Today, the company making the chips earns around a 75% margin. The company that makes the machines those chips can exist without earns around 54. If that gap closes to under 8 points and stays closed for a full year, this thesis is dead. I track it every quarter, and I'll publish it either way. This has happened before. The clearest case is the California gold rush, the one everybody uses as a metaphor and nobody uses as data. California, 1849. Robert Margo reconstructed a wage series out of Army hiring records in the National Archives. A common laborer's day went from $1 before the discovery to $7.17 at the peak. Then back to $2.62 by 1860. Up 7 times and most of the way back down in a little over a decade. That is not a story about gold. It's a story about relative prices. Labor was what the boom could not manufacture. One limit, said out loud. These are civilians hired at army installations, not the California labor force and not miners. Margot publishes wages. The reading that a day of labor was worth more sold than Doug is mine. And here is the peer-reviewed anchor, Clay and Jones, in the Journal of Economic History, working off the 1850 and 1852 censuses.
Consistent with the historical literature, we find that economic outcomes were generally small or even zero for miners, but were positive and large for non-miners.
The people who dug got nothing. The people who sold to the diggers got large. Two things about that sentence. It opens with consistent with the historical literature. It confirms what historians already held. It isn't a lone discovery. And it finds a split without saying who the non-miners were. So what comes next? The three groups I'm about to name is my reading, not theirs. Three complements in that economy. Position on the supply route, custody and credit, and eventually a patent. Sam Brannan owned the first one. His store, according to a PBS documentary, made enormous profits, as much as $5,000 of goods in a day. And then the route stopped being scarce.
But in 1851, bales of valuable goods were sometimes not worth their storage. The auctioneers rattled away shiploads of merchandise at often nominal prices.
Brannan was called the richest man in California. By 1887, he was selling pencils door to door. Selling shovels pays only while shovels are scarce. The supply of shovels is elastic. Gold-bearing gravel is not. In San Francisco, that window lasted about 2 years. Then the case that lasted. Levi Strauss arrived in 1853 and opened a wholesale dry goods business, not a minor store. 20 years later, a patent on riveted pocket openings. Two corrections that make the case better. The patent is in Jacob Davis's name, not Strauss's. Strauss put up the money and the distribution. And what it protects is tiny, a metal rivet at the edge of the pocket. Nothing else. The document itself says rivets were already being used in shoes. And the lesson runs backwards from what you'd expect. That patent is worth something precisely because it claims so little. That's where my rule comes from. A compliment you can defend is a narrow one. The one that claims too much is the one that falls first. 20 years between arriving and owning. The rush itself ended in 1855. That's 170 years ago. Demand media made content at industrial scale, writers paid, for its own filing, usually under $20 apiece. It went public in January 2011, briefly worth more than the New York Times Company. A month after the IPO, Google changed how it orders its results. In its own words, the adjustment noticeably impacts 11.8% of our queries. One tracker followed 22 sites that lived on ranking high. 2 years later, none had returned to where they were. And this isn't me saying it. Demand Media said it in its own filing. Negative changes in Google referrals had caused, quote, substantial declines to traffic to our owned and operated websites. Those are the pages they filled with the $20 articles.
Cheap production and no complement of its own. The scarce thing, there was one decision. Who orders the search results? And Google owned it and changed it on Thursday. My reading is that the whole value of that company was a rent on somebody else's algorithm. They never said that. What they did say in the document they used to go public is that Google was a risk, and they put a number on it.
So, who is selling this today? As of August, I searched for a credible measurement of the AI course and AI agency market, revenue, churn, refunds, and found none. The absence is the finding. The closest thing this sector has to an audited financial record is a court docket. September 2024. The Federal Trade Commission announces Operation AI Comply, 5 actions against firms it says used AI to supercharge deceptive conduct. Everything that follows is an allegation, not an adjudicated finding. I say that out loud because I'm putting real names on screen. Ascend Ecom. The court saw enough reason to believe the defendants had taken at least $25 million from consumers. FBA Machine. Air AI. 3 judgments, tens of millions of dollars. And all 3 were suspended, meaning the court ordered them to pay, then accepted there was nothing to pay with. And here you have to read carefully because suspended sounds like something else. It sounds like the money was already gone. The record does not say that. It says inability to pay. Never having had the money is a different story from having spent it. The documents only support the first.
And there's the asymmetry. The big number is news. But stopping at the number is not the right reading. And that's mine, not the record's. What the record does is say nothing about intent. And we're not going to guess at it either.
The business of selling businesses did not begin with AI. In 2005, a seminar company selling real estate education booked $178.6 million. It worked in 3 steps. The workshop was free. The training was cheap. And more than half the money, 57%, came from the expensive course they sold you at the end on the company's own audited filing. The structure is a century old, and it needs no technology at all. Now back to a number we do have, that $11.95. Ramp is a corporate card company. When a business pays for an AI tool with that card, Ramp sees the charge. That's where the number comes from. Money that actually moved. What gets paid on a personal card doesn't show up. What's free doesn't either. So $11.95 is the floor, not the ceiling, and it's Ramp's customers, not every company in the country.
That is the honest shape of every number in this episode. Not is it true, but what was this instrument able to see?
Which matters, because the 2 most quoted numbers about AI at work look like a scandal and aren't one. One is NVIDIA, a research project inside MIT's Media Lab, not an MIT statistical agency. The source behind the 95% of AI pilots fail headline. What it actually found: about 5% of custom enterprise tools reached production with measurable impact on profit. The other is Wharton. 74% of executives report positive returns. 5 against 74. But NVIDIA measured custom tools that reached production. Wharton measured executives reporting how they feel about returns. Those aren't 2 answers to one question, they're 2 different questions. And the purest version of that sits in one Federal Reserve note. 18% of firms had adopted AI at the end of 2025, counted by company. On the same page, 78%, counted by employment. And there dies a line you will hear everywhere, that 4 out of 5 American businesses aren't using AI. Killed by a number printed next to the one everyone quotes.
Those 2 aren't a contradiction. They're the same facts stated twice. Adoption is concentrated in large employers. The answer depends on how you count, and every side of this argument picked the weighting that flatters it.
There is a chart that draws itself when you line these numbers up. A ladder, surplus falling rung by rung from silicon down to the freelancer. It doesn't exist. And what's left in its place is better than the chart would have been. Look at what those rungs actually are. One is a reported margin, then a share of respondents, then a survey expectation, and last, a regression coefficient measured relative to a comparison group, which is compatible with both groups earning more. There is no ladder. They don't share a unit. Descending order is a visual argument made out of numbers that can't support one.
And that's not a gap in the research. That's the state of the evidence. It's why the same quarter produces AI is a bubble, and AI is transforming the enterprise from people both reading real data.
Now, let me break my own thesis in public. If more scarcity downstream means more rent, then ASML, the monopolist of extreme ultraviolet lithography, the machines without which advanced chips don't exist, should outearn NVIDIA. It doesn't. ASML runs 54% gross margin. NVIDIA runs 74.9%. The most irreplaceable input in the AI supply chain earns the lowest margin in it. So scarcity is necessary. It is not sufficient. And here I'm crossing from their figures into my economics, so I'll say so. What turns scarcity into rent is bargaining structure. How many buyers, how many substitutes, how long the contracts. Neither company says that. What they publish is margins, which takes us back to the retainer and the rest of the numbers. Running the artificial intelligence, what each answer costs is a couple of $100 a month. Tooling, a couple hundred more. Paying the person who checks the work and delivers it, that is by far the most expensive line. Add it all up, and there are contracts that leave you nearly $3,000 and contracts that leave almost nothing. And the model kills a common assumption that marginal cost rises with volume. It doesn't. What it shows is a constraint. One operator carries 5 to 9 clients before review time eats a full engineer. That's $25,000 to $45,000 a month, exactly what the hustle channels promise. And it's true. What they don't show you is the other side. What one client actually leaves you swings by more than 30 to 1, governed almost entirely by how much review time that account eats.
The binding constraint is not compute. It's attention. And reducing review time isn't a tool you buy. It's a process you redesign.
Which needs one piece of real economics. It is tempting to turn this into a 12-month rule and call it a principle. It isn't one. The real distinction is old, and it has a name. A Marshallian quasi-rent is the return to a factor that is only temporarily fixed. It dissipates as supply catches up. A Ricardian rent persists because the factor is genuinely fixed. My 5 complements are candidates for the second. Almost everything else sold to you is the first. Brannon's store was the first kind. Levi's patent was the second. That's the whole difference, and it took 20 years to show up. So here's my decision rule. Mine, not a law. If the input set behind an offer can be replicated in under 12 months, I treat it as a quasi-rent and value it at 0. 12 is a number I chose. Change it if you have a better one, but choose it before you build. And here is that dissipation printed on a pricing page. The price of 1 million tokens fell more than 90% between March 2023 and April 2025. But this is the number that proves the mechanism. The top of the line cost $15 a million in March 2024. 14 months later, the new top of the line cost exactly the same.
The top of the line did not fall. What fell was the price of yesterday's frontier. The frontier holds its price because the frontier is temporarily fixed. Everything behind it collapses toward cost as supply catches up. The whole thesis in a price list.
So what do you do with this? 3 things. 1. Run the replication clock before you build. The evidence is the app economy. In 2015, over 60% of developers earned under $500 per app per month. So write down what a competent competitor with reasonable capital would need to copy your input set. If the honest answer is under a year, you're not building an asset, you're taking a temporary position. Price it like 1. 2. Sell accountability, not output. The measurable division isn't AI versus non-AI. It's execution versus judgment. Inside one Upwork report, freelancers doing more complex work with AI saw earnings rise 45%. AI-based execution tasks saw earnings fall 28%. One qualification, because it's load-bearing. Those 2 categories are described differently in 2 documents from the same study, and whether they're one category or 2 is not established. My contrast depends on the answer, and I'd rather tell you than let you find it. The echo is right there in the P&L we just built. Human review is 51 to 67% of the cost. Your client is already paying for accountability. They don't know that's the line item.
3.
Own the reorganization, not the tool. Where AI pays is inside organizations that rebuild a process, and that's a job or a company. It is not a side hustle. The evidence is the shape of adoption. The heaviest spenders put in hundreds of times what the typical company does, which gives you the honest warning. The true answer to how do I make money with AI is frequently get the job where they pay you to do the reorganization. The least sellable answer available, which is precisely why nobody sells it. We started with a $5,000 a month offer, and the machine inside it was about a tenth of the cost. The gap isn't a mystery, and it isn't a conspiracy. It's a relative price shock. When the price of intelligence falls, the price of what intelligence can't manufacture rises. Distribution, trust, rights, energy, license. That's where the money went, not to the technology, but to what it made scarce. In 1849, it went to the man who owned the store. In 2011, to the company that owned the ranking. Neither of those was the technology either.
The owner of the complement captures the surplus during the build-out. The reorganizer captures it afterward. And competitive structure decides how much either of them gets.
So the question isn't, can you make money with AI? It's where in that cycle you're standing, build out or afterward, and whether you can finance the wait. Every rent in this episode had a clock on it. Brannon's ran about 2 years. Nobody tells you what time it is on yours. So, how long a wait are you financing? Tell me in the comments and be specific about the years. If this changed how you read a $5,000 a month offer, subscribe. Every video, I take one number the market repeats on faith and show you what's inside it. And the test stands 800 basis points for quarters. I'll publish it either way.